Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, India's largest platform for entrepreneurs. We bring you expert advice on how to make and manage your money right, hiring right, strategies related to innovation. In fact, everything and anything that matters to you, the entrepreneur, we got it covered right here on the Leaders of Tomorrow. Today, we're continuing our countdown to the budget with a focus on the fintech industry. What are entrepreneurs in this industry looking forward to from the government? Our experts on the panel tonight breaking it down for us. Let me introduce them. Ashneer Grover, CEO and co-founder of BharatPe; Nitin Bhatnagar, Associate Director, India, PCI Security Standards Council; and Shilpa Mankar, Ahluwalia, partner, Shardul Amarchand Mangaldas. Ashneer, Shilpa, Nitin, thank you so much for your time here on this panel. I want to start by probably coming to the entrepreneur on the panel, Ashneer, get your opening comments. One thing, if you would like to hear from the government when it comes to commentary, what would it be?
On the budget, I've always felt it's all about tax now. So we're not reliant on the budget for where economy is going, but we are definitely reliant on the budget on where our taxes are going to go and how much are we going to pay as taxes. I think last year has been a bad year for consumer demand. People have been cooped up at their homes, and we need to kickstart things. So one thing which
Yeah,
would be music to my ears is if the government announces tax cuts and tax rate cuts. 45% tax when people don't get the adequate services against that is just not going to work in India. So my belief is if tax rates come down, you're going to still see more tax revenue for the government. So
sure.
tax cuts is what works for me.
Nitin, to you next. Is that something you're looking forward to from the budget? What should an entrepreneur perhaps be expecting, looking forward to from the budget if they're in the fintech space?
So I think, see, what I would rather say here is that from the budget, I think the data security is very important. I think data security aspects to be considered, and I think one of the key areas that should be considered is the adoption of the PCI data security standards, or basically having some kind of a training framework which can help the industry or the fintechs to secure their environments from various data breaches and the frauds that has been we have been all seeing during the pandemic.
All right, Shilpa, let me bring you in on this. If there's something that you think should be the headline from the budgetary announcement, what should it be?
So, India is known to have globally one of the best fintech digital infrastructures in the world, and I think the push from the government has been there. I think we need a continued push on digital infrastructure, particularly for tier 2 and tier 3 cities, where those are the new focus areas for fintech platforms. I think one critical point here is, along with the digital infrastructure, we also need to push financial literacy and digital literacy, which will increase adoption of fintech. And government can think of giving tax breaks or other incentives to platforms that actually invest in these aspects, because there are cost elements involved. But without digital and financial literacy, that push won't fully achieve the objective.
Okay, so a couple of things that have been raised in the initial comments. I want to talk about the overall impact that the pandemic has had on the fintech space in terms of consumer sentiment, in terms of just driving more and more people to being open really about digital payments. Now, the first thing that I want to discuss is digital inclusion, digital increasing really the number of people who are coming to different lending platforms, and what the government perhaps should and can do when it comes to also financial literacy, and what entrepreneurs can perhaps, what they're looking forward to. If they're saying that we want more people to come to our platforms, this is what perhaps the government should be doing when it comes to financial literacy, or just making platforms more secure. If we're talking about financial literacy, ensuring that there's more support for people coming onto fintech and payment platforms and using payment gateways, what needs to be done? Shilpa, maybe I can come to you first on that.
So I think two key things here. One is, of course, financial literacy and digital literacy to enable people in remote areas, in particular, to get comfortable with transacting digitally. But along with that, I think one infrastructure piece that the government can is a shared KYC database, because KYC has been a critical pain point for fintech over the last several years. It's a huge cost of doing business. And the moment you address the KYC cost, which is the cost of onboarding customers, I think that will really help both customers sort of be onboarded seamlessly. So a shared database of KYC information which fintech platforms can tap into, I think would be terrific.
Okay, Ashneer, would you have a view on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we need is a bureau for frauds. See, the way you have a bureau for credit check, I can tell you that these are the certain merchants who get onboarded, but they have a propensity to do fraud. These are the customers who have propensity to do fraud, and that data sits today individually in each fintech. Now, if that data can be reported on a common platform and can be pinged on a common platform as well, we can always weed out the people who are doing frauds, and therefore everyone's system becomes that much more secure. So we need a central bureau for fraud where we can mark either the mobile numbers or the bank account numbers which are of and fraudsters.
Okay, so speaking of frauds, that's something that is Nitin's specialty area. You started your sort of conversation by talking about data security, but I do want to bring you in at this point and talk about, with everything that's happening globally as far as data security is concerned, Nitin, in India specifically, maybe one or two things that we should be looking at. And I also want to ask you about, standards development really for the country. This is something that you and I have discussed previously. What needs to be done urgently? Do you have a wish list for the government?
Yeah, exactly. I think let me start with this point. If you run a business and do not have a trained or qualified internal security assessors who can help prevent,
Okay.
hackers accessing your systems or help catch these hackers early on their attack, you're putting your customers' financial information at a greater risk. Now, to put it into this perspective, since the India's first lockdown, which happened on 22nd March, and has a potential of 1.08 billion attempted cyber attacks, which if successful, could have cost Indian businesses close to 2.16 trillion, dollar 2.16 trillion, or roughly around 20% of the country's GDP in 2019. So not only are the cyber attacks widespread, but the cyber breaches can be incredibly costly for your businesses. So what we need to focus today here is to invest for training and employing the cybersecurity professionals, which is going to be far cheaper than fixing a cyber breach. And it can be
Okay.
much less hassle than you can think of.
Okay. But what does the government, in your opinion, need to do on that, Nitin?
No, I think, see, that's what I said, the training, focus on training, getting
Okay.
something around trainings to create, cybersecurity professionals in the country I think, should be the key focus, going forward for the government.
Okay, Nitin, point taken. More training, more focus really on data security and why it is crucial for small businesses to ensure that they're protecting the data rather than, thinking about the costs involved, which could be higher if they are hacked, for instance. Shilpa, we are in the backdrop of the GDPR, and data privacy is becoming more and more crucial here in India as well. There's a lot of conversation around it. What would you like to really sort of perhaps see by way of commentary from the government on data security?
So, Nanda, you're absolutely right. I think data privacy is going to be the biggest thing that fintech is, dealing with in 2021. We do have a very comprehensive data privacy legislation that's pending final approval, and that's modeled largely on GDPR. And once that is enacted, I think that will be a very good framework for data privacy. I think the one critical aspect that the government should note is when we're evolving the data privacy jurisprudence, of course, we do need to protect and preserve customer data, but at the same time, we do need to ensure that fintech gets access, because data is essentially what fintech needs to be able to innovate. So finding that right balance between protecting data and still allowing businesses to access data, I think will be critical. I think taking off from what Nitin said, yes, having, I think, standards for data security important. The government has discussed a concept of a data score where fintech platforms and companies are assessed by third party evaluators, and there's a data audit which then generates a data score like a credit score, which gives both customers and regulators a sense of where that platform stands on the data protection framework. And I think you can also then link data access to a data score. So the platform has a high data score. You can give them access to Aadhaar based KYC and access to other shared data platforms.
Okay, so I want to talk about how perhaps the payments industry is changing. We started by talking about the impact that the pandemic has had on the fintech market, on mobile payments, and it has been a positive impact. So now going forward for 2021, 2022, for the short term, what should the government perhaps do, even as the lines between banks and fintech companies, mobile wallets, etc., they're sort of blurring right now, and we're talking about a market that also has a high percentage of sort of fragmented lenders who are doing a lot of P2P lending. What, in your mind, should the government perhaps do when it comes to encouraging more formalized lending, more formalized, the fintech industry? Maybe, Ashneer, I could come to you on this first. Do you have any thoughts on what the government needs to do to really encourage this business and this industry?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Government needs to step in. See, what's happening is very simple. There's a demand for credit. Now, whenever there's a market for anything, that gets serviced. Now, if we move away the supply constraints, then it will get serviced by the right people. Otherwise, it will get serviced by the wrong people. So, one thing the government has to acknowledge, there's a huge demand for credit, and it's only going to go up because of the pandemic. Because everyone has been short on cash, everyone is cash flow is very low, so people need credit to kickstart things and get back to normal life. The simple things that the government can do is, for example, today, if you are a company which has Mauritius money, you cannot apply for an NBFC license with RBI. Now, 99.9% of NBFC money in India previously has come from Mauritius. So the government has to take slightly more benevolent view of some critical things which are making it a constraint on the supply side, where significant players with significant credentials can come and service the market better. So for me, the
Okay.
government has to look at the regulatory aspect very closely and solve things like the Mauritius issue, which has been lingering for some time.
Fair enough. Shilpa, would you perhaps want to also take that question on?
I think two things here. One is, the one thing that fintech has really changed is the way it delivers financial products and services. I think what fintech has done is it creates distribution channels, and now you have a single point for delivery of multiple financial products, whether it's investment, credit. And I think there is a need now for a consolidated sort of regulatory approach, how we even regulate these products, because earlier there were different verticals and different regulators for each of these products. So I think that's one, that's one thought that in terms of strategy the government can think of, just more collaboration amongst regulators, and they have done that. And in the sandboxing space, I think each regulator, whether it's RBI or RDA, they have come up with sandboxing regimes for innovating new products. And I think the more collaboration we see, I think that will just help growth in products.
Okay, I'm going to have to take a very quick break on that note, but we'll come back with much more on the other side. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. This is a special budget series that we're doing on the show. And tonight we're putting the spotlight on the fintech industry. Another area which has opened up, during the pandemic, and thanks to the pandemic, are markets which are in the tier 3, tier 4 markets. If entrepreneurs need to tap that effectively, what are some of the things that you, as this panel of experts, thinks that the government needs to put in place and put in place urgently to enable entrepreneurs to effectively tap these newer markets? Nitin, maybe I could ask you first, and then I could come to both Shilpa as well as Ashneer on this.
You see, if you look at the sectors, if you look at I think the government has been really has been have taken some great initiatives. One of them, if you talk about the RBI decision on the increase of the countless transactions from 2,000 to 5,000, which has which was a much required boost to the Indian digital payment industry. I think this hike in the limit has already allowed more people to transact conveniently and safely during this pandemic, and also have given businesses the opportunity to grow further by developing their point of sale terminals and encourage merchant acceptance, which is essential for the growth of the sector also, right? But
Okay.
at our recently concluded forum that we did in India, is that several cybersecurity experts came together to discuss the risk attached to the even to the contactless payments as well. It is now
Sure.
absolutely important that merchant solution providers and the vendors to look into the adoption of the PCI data security standards to help protect their customer payment data. And the consumers should have confidence that a contactless transaction is as secure as any preceding form of payment. That is,
Sure.
the responsibility of our industry and the business community to protect customers.
Okay. Fair enough, Shilpa.
So, I think if we look at this both from the demand side and the supply side, I think the supply side penetration is essentially also how you lower costs of onboarding customers. And we discussed concepts around data sharing, lower KYC. I think all of that will help on the supply side. On the demand side, I think initiatives linked to customer awareness, which will improve digital adoption, because I think once you move from cash transactions to digital transactions, the shift is a permanent one. And you need the customer to trust system to be able to continue that that digital transaction. So I think from the customer side, initiatives around financial literacy, digital literacy, and customer awareness, I think will really help the penetration in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities.
Okay. Ashneer?
I'm a believer the government needs to do less than more. So,
Okay.
as an entrepreneur, I take it on us to drive penetration in deeper into the country. I think uh, coming of WhatsApp on WhatsApp Pay will drive it automatically. I think if the government just steps away and lets the market play as it should, it'll have its job cut out.
Okay, that's like a true entrepreneur, Ashneer. I also want to discuss GST for the fintech space. Shilpa, do you have a view in terms of what really needs to be done as far as GST is concerned? Lower rates, of course, is something that everyone's been asking for. Standardized rates. What would you perhaps like to see?
So I think one thing that we've been hearing a lot about is lower rates for financial services. I think that's one theme that we've heard. So it would be good to see something on that front.
Ashneer, would you also want to maybe take that question on?
I agree with Shilpa. I think not only financial services, GST rates across the board have to be brought down. 18% is incentive enough for anyone not to do certain things or not to report certain revenues. More especially for startups, what I think is the government should bring in a concept of giving GST credit against some foreign capital that you are able to bring into the country, right? Because if you look at it, startups is the biggest contributor to fresh capital which is coming from outside. So the government needs to
Sure.
incentivize it more. So for every penny you bring in, you should get some GST rebate as a startup.
All right. So there is clearly, a wish list and a huge wish list on the behalf of the fintech industry as we're counting down to the budget in terms of what we'd like to see from the government. But let me take closing comments. We're unfortunately running out of time on this panel. Shilpa, I do want to come to you first. You raised a very important point in terms of having a uniform sort of regulation, because right now you're talking about multiple financial services being sold through technology platforms. One area of concern, for instance, is that insurance policies in India haven't been changed in forever, in the longest time. If there is one thing that you think that the government can do to simplify the policy around multiple financial services, what would you like to see?
So I think what we'd like to see is traditionally, you have different distributional channels for different financial services and products, but fintech has created a single pipe, with the customer at the end, and you can deliver practically every single product via that channel. So I think a regulatory framework that allows multiple distribution of products. So for example, if I have a customer, I should be able to deliver a payment product, a credit product, and an insurance product through the same platform without having to navigate multiple sets of regulatory frameworks. And fintech is all about collaboration, so have a framework where you can collaborate with different licensed entities, so that delivery on a single platform is possible and made easy.
Nitin, let me come to you next and talk about 2021. What sort of trends perhaps that you're working on as part of PCISSC? What's exciting you? How you're working closer with industry? What collaboration you're working on? Anything you can share?
Sure. So let me just first of all, highlight is that I think for the prevalence of the cybercrime in India is very clear, with more than 53% of the data breaches this year being caused by malicious cyber attack. So what it demonstrated that how cyber criminals are continuously updating their techniques to increase their chances of successfully breaching a business, securing security frameworks, and to more efficiently steal financial information. So this represents a clear and significant problem for India and demonstrates the need for a cohort and highly trained data security professional to champion the fight against the cybercrime. What we have been focusing on is on developing on the mobile standards, and that's going to be our key focus area for 2021. And also, the last but not least, we are trying to introduce new aspects to ensure payment data is protected, such as moving to use dynamic tokens and simplifying the security requirements so that the many small businesses or fintechs and consumers can adopt these payment options. PCI-DSS version 4.0 will be a radical overhaul, and the process will be is going to for this version is going to complete next year, which or probably with this year we will be completing by mid of next year.
Ashneer, I'm going to let you have the last word. Through this panel, we've been discussing what the government needs to do. But if I can ask you, what should fintechs do to tap the opportunity that's being presented to them? More personalization, perhaps, more consolidation, perhaps, is going to be the order of the day for this industry. One or two things briefly that you think entrepreneurs should do to tap the opportunity.
Fintechs in India need to be just focused. My belief is that being everything for everyone does not work. It's not a winner take all market. There's no money to be made in payments. These are the hard facts about the business. So you have to be very, very clear on what your core monetization has to be, what your core target segment is, and double down on that. So don't try to be everything for everyone. Don't try to say that you will make money by cross selling something. You should be just selling one thing, and that should be making money for you.
All right, then. Out of time on this panel, but thank you so much for your time, Shilpa, Nitin, Ashneer. Thank you for taking the time to join us on this panel.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Ananda.
Completely out of time on this panel. If you have any feedback for us, our contact details is up on your screens as we speak. That's all we could pack into tonight's panel. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good night.